My Dodge Viper is dead. It's stuck here in the middle of a cow pasture, and after going through pretty much every single one of its systems, I still can't figure out why. And when I first got the car, it started right up with a jump, and it drove just fine, and even though it had a handful of other issues, it never failed to fire over. And after fixing its cooling system and just doing a general refresh of some ancient parts, I drove this car around for a few days straight, and everything always worked perfect until now.
So we were actually moving this car to take pictures of it for the auction, and it drove right to this spot. It stopped, and then ever since it's cranked, but it doesn't start. Obviously, we've done all the basics, things like checking the fuel level, which is low, so we added more fuel to it, and that didn't start it. We checked battery voltage, obviously. That didn't change its outcome. And well, let me just show you. It cranks strong, sounds good, but it doesn't want to start at all. And I don't want to just keep firing it in case it is dumping fuel in the cylinders. That's one of the mysteries we got here, and I'll show you that in a second. Now, when I did the initial work on this car, I noticed a ton of original parts. This car is over 20 years old at this point, and so I like to think, like, what's the most common thing that would fail? You've heard it before, a car needs air, it needs fuel, it needs spark, and it needs power to run. Those are your main ones. It also needs compression, it needs timing, but start real simple. And the most simple thing that I could think of when we know there's fuel in the fuel tank is just to see if it will run off of starting fluid. I'm gonna open the throttle body blade here.
Sometimes I wonder why I choose car problems that last years on end when I could just choose truffle butter filet mignon that only takes a couple minutes to prepare, because Factor makes really good food really easy. These fresh, not frozen meals were delivered straight to my door, and they even came along with breakfast, which you can get right now free for a year.
These are so tasty. They've got everything you'd want with your morning eggs, a little bit of smoky bacon, some cheddar cheese, and they are perfect when you're on the go.
And while I might not have the best track record when it comes to finishing my car projects, I have a 100% completion rate when it comes to finishing my Factor meals. I love this one so much. It was the 4-cheese tortellini and Italian sausage pizzaiola. And since Factor recently doubled the size of their menu, the variety is amazing. There's truly something out there for everyone, even if you're on a specific diet.
Today for lunch, I've got surf and turf, along with these fresh vegetables. I mean, it's so darn good, and it beats the heck out of going to the fast food restaurant, and it's easy. All you have to do is hit that link in the description box and make sure you use code SAMCRACF. That's going to get you 50% off your first box and free breakfast for a year over at Factor. Hit that link in the description box. Make sure you use that code SAMCRACF to get 50% off your first box and free breakfast for a year over at Factor.
And just shoot a smidgen in. Let's see what happens now. Look at that. Okay. So the fact that it starts and runs for a second off of starting fluid tells us we have a fuel system issue. My guess at this point is that we just have an old failed fuel pump. I love these old cars that have these Schrader valves. Still, most of the modern cars, they've gotten rid of this, but this is a surefire way to test for fuel pressure, and you can see already when I'm twisting it on. Do you see that? There's gas that's coming out of that Schrader valve, which is a good sign that there is fuel pressure here. If our fuel pumps have failed, when you turn the key on to the car, basically that would be dry. It'd be one of the reasons why the car is not running, because it's just not getting any gas. You can see our gauge is all the way at the bottom. It's at 0. When we put the key in and just turn it to accessory power on, it jumped. Look at that. It jumped beautifully too. Right to 60 PSI. Now, that's a good sign that our fuel pumps are working, which would make this really weird. And when we crank it, if we see it kind of fluttering or die down and go back to 0, that's when we know, again, we're going to have a problem with the fuel pumps. But if it stays consistently up in that higher range, our problem is not the fuel pump. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. No, it's getting higher. So the fuel pumps are not the issue. I've never had an instance where the car will start on starting fluid, but there's good pressure to the rail. So the fact that we have good fuel pressure means that the fuel is making its way to the front of the car, to the engine where we need it, but it's not making its way into the cylinder, which would mean we have an injector issue. But there's not a chance that all 10 injectors just failed overnight. which to me then potentially takes the focus away from fuel and moves it over to electronics. Has something failed on the engine computer that's not allowing the injectors to fire? Or potentially, how does the immobilizer work on this car, which I don't even think there is one. Look, if you look at the keys, there's no alarm button. I haven't seen any sort of blinking light on this dashboard. I haven't heard an alarm when we've opened it with a low battery or anything like that. So I'm not sure yet whether there is an immobilizer system or not. Now we kind of shift our focus, but we don't want to leave fuel completely out of the question. We need to make sure that the injectors are putting that fuel into the cylinder. So to do that, we're gonna use one of these Noid lights here. Basically, these lights will just hook up into one of our injector connectors. The right one's gonna be either this guy or this guy right here, just based on the way the pins look. I'm just gonna grab this one right here. And so there's our injector connector. Let me grab one of these lights. And yeah, we just take it and plug it in place. So basically, when we go to crank the car now, we're gonna look and see if this lights up. If it does, it means the car is sending the signal to fire the injector. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3. That's so weird. So this thing's lighting up and it's not starting. And we got fuel. And we've got signal to the injectors. So now I'm off of fuel and I'm on to like, why is it not igniting? But we obviously have some sort of ignition because it started on starting fluid, right? I guess starting fluid is more combustible than gasoline. And especially if we've been cranking it. I've been trying to keep those cranks short because again, we don't want to just fill these cylinders with fuel. But if we've been cranking it, and the spark plugs are wet, but it died in the middle of us. So this is like where we got initially. This is where we're super puzzled. I'm somewhere in between fuel, now ignition is in play, and still potentially the engine computer. Let's go ahead, we're gonna pull one of those spark plugs. Let's verify visually that the injector is firing, that there is fuel getting in the cylinder, and then let's take a look at our ignition system. Let's take a look at that. Is it wet? Mm-hmm. It doesn't smell like gas. Man, look at how old these spark plugs are. I mean, this wouldn't cause it not to run, I don't think. But these are some ancient spark plugs. These should just be replaced anyway.
All along, I've been saying that I want to see fuel making its way into the cylinder, but I've got to correct myself. This Viper is port injected, and that's where fuel is sprayed behind the intake valves. So when we look inside the cylinder with our scope here and crank the car, there is no obvious fuel spray we can see like with a direct injected car. However, we can see some moisture sitting in the cylinder area, which has to be unburnt fuel from the car being cranked over and over again, but not running. So with all these clues, we should be able to rule out our fuel system as the main cause of our problems.
So we took this other spark plug out and look, it looks worse than the first one. Really corroded around this area here, but I don't think that would cause it not to fire, and the idea that all 10 of them have gone bad here and still doesn't make much sense. So as we were working through things and I was shopping for a new set of spark plugs on Amazon, this thing was recommended to me for 15 bucks. And so even though you'd probably be better off taking that $15 and just putting it towards the new spark plugs, I really want to figure out what the issue is here with this car. And so it'll be kind of fun to just see what happens. So this is quite simply a spark plug tester. When we turn this knob on, this dial right here will replicate the engine RPMs at these certain values. And while we should see some spark here, we've got the lights turned off in the shop. Here we go. So we can kind of rule out the idea that even though these spark plugs are old and corroded, they seem to be working fine. As we continue grasping for straws, now I'm going to just hook up one of these simple ignition testers. This is similar to the Noid light. This will light up if both our wire and the ignition coil that's driving the ignition is working. So go ahead, let's crank this thing over and see what we find. Yep, stop. Yeah, it is lighting. So, what the heck, man?
Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering why I haven't pulled out a diagnostic tool yet. And well, it is one of the first things we did right after the car died. I live by these code readers, but in my experience in some older cars, they just don't work all that well, and unfortunately this seems to be the case with the Viper. All throughout this, with the cranking off and on, we've not generated a single trouble code to help point us in the right direction. But another thing that can be helpful on these tools is the live data that they provide. Right here on this screen, we're going to want to look at a few of these data points while we crank the car. We've got CKP and CMP count, also the RPMs. The way I understand it, the crankshaft position sensor, or CKP, reads the rotation of the crank and provides a signal for the RPMs. If the engine computer doesn't have this information, well, the car won't run. But like I mentioned before, these diagnostic tools can be wonky on older cars, and when we started cranking the Viper, you could see here each of the values we're interested in turned to NA, and then when we stop, there are some numbers generated, so that's good, but I can never get the RPMs to actually show anything.
This is one of those issues that should be way simpler than it's become. I have no clue what's going on. We checked all the fuses. Obviously, we did that live data scan, and I thought that showed us our clue there. The fact that there was no RPM signal, no crankshaft position data. Well, that would tell you that maybe we got a failed crankshaft position sensor. If that is indeed bad, well, the car doesn't know exactly when to send that fuel to the cylinder, when to ignite that fuel with spark, and that's all driven by the PCM. But the fact that the car starts on starting fluid, the fact that we could read the PCM with that scan tool, it's got me all sorts of messed up. It makes me want to go back to the idea that we have an issue with fuel, and we very well could. I just will not believe that we have an issue on all 10 cylinders and we have perfect pressure at the rail. Guys, if you can help me out with this one at all, please let me know down in the comments. I'm going crazy. I just want this thing to drive again because I really want to move it along for a really big reason. We're actually getting stuff sorted around here. We're making big progress on a lot of different projects, and one very, very big project that's been years in the making. And well, this also has been years in the making. The 599 is out of the field and up on the lift. We're doing the final repairs and adjustments to get this thing actually rolling on the road. Here, I'll show you really the major part of this that went wrong and the thing that held us up for a very long time. So since basically everything in the front end of this car was destroyed during the accident, well, we replaced as much of it as we could. Some of it we had to have fabricated, like our oil cooler down here. But the big thing that we could not source that just doesn't seem to exist anywhere is a steering rack. You can buy steering racks for generation newer Ferraris, generation older Ferraris. For whatever reason, you look up a Ferrari 599 left-hand drive steering rack, it just doesn't exist anywhere. And I want to give a big thanks to my friend Radarosa, who saw one pop up at a marketplace way far away from where I'm standing right now, and we bid on it and we won this thing. We have a replacement steering rack for this car. The one that was damaged in the accident, V10 kind of welded up just to get it in shape, just to work, and it was not right. When you were driving, things were bad, bad, bad. And so it was fine to get around on and off frame racks, but it was not safe to drive it down the road. We have finally got that part, and the only reason we're waiting to throw it in is because while we were kind of getting it ready for the swap, we noticed that our front sway bar was a bit damaged, and so I was able to source a used one of those. It was cheap, around $100, and it came with some links that we needed anyway. So once we get that all in, we've got our upgraded suspension in, and we're ready to hit the road and finally give the 599 a drive. I'm hoping that's really soon, like in the next couple days or so. But until then, there's a few other projects that I got stashed around here and some other places that I've been meaning to show you. Speaking of crank no starts, I'm really excited to dig into this thing right here. So this was at a local Tampa auction, and it was bought back from the auction. Those are the cars that when they pop up, I take a close look when those cars are interesting. So this looks like kind of just a 5 Series, a decent looking 5 Series, nice color, but it's a 550i. So it has the twin turbo N63. This has the N63 TU, which stands for technical update. The first one was so bad, they had to technically update it. Anyway, this thing has the potential to make a ton of power. It's modified, but it is a crank no start. In the auction listing, they just said nothing. They basically said doesn't start, doesn't drive. We've gotten it to crank, and we think we found the culprit. This could be, depending on how well it runs, when we get it running, one of the best deals I got this year. I always get myself overly excited when it comes to these BMWs. They've been pretty bad to me lately, but check this car out. Look, it's got the M Sport package, so it just looks better all around. Of course, you get the M on the steering wheel, on the door sills. It's got the better front fascia. This is a really sharp car. And again, I found some really cool mods, so it could sound really good. I just don't know if it's gonna run really good. And now for one of my biggest projects, I really haven't shown you guys, it's maybe been in the background somewhere, and that's this place. I've been working on this for the last several years. It's all thanks to you guys. I finally have a place to store some of my cars. It's still a work in progress, but we have amazing storage and amazing lifts. Thanks to BenPack. This is one of their tallest two-post lifts. You could see that even the most boring cars need a little bit of work, and not even boring. That's one of the newest cars I ever bought, and we still need to do some work to it. But this has been a dream, and finally it's here. Don't worry, I still love working outside underneath a tree, but it's time that we get some of the proper cars, their proper storage. That's what these ultra-wide 4-post lifts are for. You can see there's parking for 2 on the bottom, and of course 2 up top. And even though they're storage lifts, they got this awesome channel down the center, so you can still get to the underside of most of your car. There's still a lot of work that can be done. So it's like dual purpose, and especially since some old Ferraris are gonna go up here, that'll be really handy. I can't wait to drive that 599. I'm literally bringing a new set of wheels over to it right now so we can get it on the ground and rolling. If you can't wait to see that, be sure to hit that like button. Also, make sure you're following along. That way, when any of these new videos or projects come to the channel, you're the first to find out. Guys, I thank you so much for watching this today, and I'll catch you very soon.